Hey, what's up, friends? This video is going to be incredibly valuable, so do two things. Pay close attention and, above all, enjoy this lesson because it's going to help you improve your chess skills a lot. We're going to take a closer look at a fascinating game that was played by the legendary Garry Kasparov, who had the black pieces as he faced off against his opponent Piquet. The important thing to remember about this lesson is that we're going to learn how to play one of the very best and most effective defenses with the black pieces in chess. We're talking about the King's Indian defense. I absolutely love this defensive setup, and once you finish watching this video, I promise it's going to become one of your absolute favorite ways to play as well. Personally, I think it's quickly becoming my favorite way to counter the queen's pawn opening in my own games. I'm going to explain the core ideas, how to deal with them, and every single detail you'll need to understand to play a successful game using this opening. White plays knight to f3. The good thing about this defense is that, really, white can play whatever they want, and we're pretty much always going to play the same way. We'll start by Fianchetto in our bishop. This is our main plan, okay? Usually, when white starts with the queen's pawn, they also tend to use the queen's bishop pawn to place it next to it, that is, d4 and c4. So it's almost always a good idea to place this bishop in the fianchetto, going from the h8 square to the a1 square because the d4 pawn is, in quotes, weak. Let me explain. Since the c pawn has advanced, it no longer defends the d4 pawn, and now it can only be defended by the d pawn. And I'll tell you something else. Usually, in the King's Indian, the most dangerous thing for black is if white also pushes this pawn to e4. That way, the d4 pawn will always be a weakness. In this case, the game continued as follows. Knight to c3. White is playing perfectly well. And black castles. Here, we've already accomplished our first task. To fianchetto our bishop and castle short. You'll need to do this in every game. See how it's pretty simple? You can actually use this plan with the white pieces too. Instead of being called the King's Indian defense, it would be called the King's Indian attack. Something you really need to keep in mind, and it's super important that you remember this, is that when your opponent plays the move e4, which they should because we're giving them the whole center, they should take advantage of it with their pawns, and we absolutely must respond with the move e6. Most of you already know this, but it's extremely important. If we don't do this, they're going to play e5 and kick out our knight, which will always end up badly placed. In this case, playing d6, it wouldn't be a good idea for them to advance to e5, because then all we would have to do is make the exchanges. I'll show you here. Pawn takes pawn, and then we could exchange queens. If they don't want to lose castling, they should capture with the knight. And as you can see, this position, thank you, is much better for black than for white. Let's play, for example, knight to g4. We're threatening this pawn with two pieces, we're ahead in development, this bishop is about to come out, we're already castled, and our opponent is going to have a really tough time. If instead of capturing with the knight, they capture with the king, this move is even stronger because it attacks with a fork. You can see it here on this f2 square. And of course, it also attacks this point, which we're definitely going to recover. So we come to a conclusion. Let's put this back the way it was. When white plays this e4 right here, we absolutely must play d6. And we're not afraid now if they push to e5, because after the exchanges, we trade queens and end up in a better middle game or end game. This is extremely important. You should always think a little bit long term. Don't just think about what will happen in the next few moves, but also about what kind of position you'll be left with. As I always tell you, you know there are three phases in chess: the opening, the middle game, and the end game. And we need to master all three and think about how they connect so we don't end up lost later on, okay? Alright, in this game, for example, the most mainline variation was played. And that's what I love about studying these kinds of games. Obviously, the opponent with the white pieces has a 2600 ELO rating and defends incredibly well. But the thing is, we usually play against much weaker players than this kind of opponent. So, you know what? They won't defend nearly as well. It'll actually be even easier for us to win the game. At this point, we've got everything set up. We've established, let's say, our initial piece setup, and this is where a lot of people get lost. Don't worry, let's take a moment to think. Once you have this set up, do the white pieces want to castle kingside or queenside? I can already see they want to castle kingside, right? If they had developed this bishop and this queen to castle queenside, then it would be obvious. If they castle kingside, we want to push the e-pawn. If they castle queenside, we want to push the c5 pawn, and this is really important. I'm going to give you a little trick. Pay attention to this. Pawn chains, okay? This, for example, would be a pawn chain. Do you see it? They give us clues about where our attack should go. We want to attack the king because in the King's Indian, our goal is to checkmate our opponent. Just like that. Deliver checkmate. If we have to sacrifice a piece along the way, we'll do it. Because our goal isn't just to get a slightly better endgame. No, it's to checkmate, okay? So if they're going to castle kingside, which is what we're seeing in this game, they're going to castle short. We're going to push this e5 so that our pawn chain points right at the king. If they castle queenside, our pawn chain would also be pointing at the king. This is way more important than you might think, and you'll see in a moment that it's going to play out exactly as I'm telling you, just like I'm saying. All right, question number 1. Chess teacher, aren't you just giving away the e5 pawn here? Shouldn't we play a move like knight to bd7 or knight to c6 first to defend the e5 square? No, that would be a slight inaccuracy. Let's put it that way. If we play knight to c6, it's true that we put good pressure on d4, but they could immediately push this pawn here, and it would bother our knight. If we play knight to bd7, Wrigley, we're a bit passive, and we're not threatening anything yet. Even though it's a good move, we're going to prefer to develop this knight via c6 so that later we can bring it to e7. This move order will work really well for you in your games, so remember one thing. Whenever you can, try to develop the knight through c6. So let's see, chess teacher, tell me why you're not just giving away the pawn here. Why do you do it right away? All right, if white decides to capture this pawn, after the exchanges, obviously here they should trade queens first, because if not, it would be exactly the same but worse, since we would be the ones to trade and would have to move one of our pieces back. So they have to trade queens, and now all we have to do is wait and see if they take the pawn or not. If they've gone into this line, obviously they're going to take the pawn we just, in quotes, gave away, because if you look closely, if not, they've ended up in a really bad spot. They've given us the whole file, this bishop is going to come out, and this position is much better for black. So what happens if they take this pawn? Well, the good thing about this bishop and fianchetto is that we can always jump in with this knight to get it back. So a move like knight takes e4 would already be recovering the pawn. If they capture our knight, we'll capture theirs. And if they retreat their knight, we could, for example, play knight takes knight. We would double these pawns, and thinking ahead to an endgame, we'd be in a strategically won endgame because our opponent, let's put it like this, would have these 2 pawns that are super easy to attack since they're isolated and doubled, while we would simply have 2 pawn islands that are really well placed and with no problems at all. So already thinking about a possible endgame, we'd be entering a winning endgame. Look how interesting this is, right? The sap. These pieces the way they were again. This one was over here, and this knight had developed over here. Perfect, so we can play e5 right away. They can't take it from us. In this case, what they did was castle, which is the main move of all. Kasparov really understood the King's Indian here. Honestly, he was a true genius, and he played the move knight to c6. If you've been paying attention to my explanations, you'll understand this, chess snitcher. This move isn't a bit strange. They play d5 and kick out this knight, which is exactly what we want. Here we have 2 options. Either take here, okay, and play this kind of position, where now our goal is to put the rook on the file and play an open position. Or what I personally like the most, without a doubt, is to play knight to c6, precisely to force this kind of advance. Not advancing would be very dangerous for white, because this point would be heavily attacked, and also indirectly by this bishop. Do you remember how dangerous it was? And then there would surely be very dangerous knight takes e4 moves, so they have to advance. And this is the most thrilling thing about the King's Indian. It boxes us in, and we want to bring our knight to e7. You remember this? Knight to c6, knight to e7. Super important. We are now moving directly into a truly and spectacularly exciting middle game that we have seen today. It's also extremely important to properly evaluate the middle game plans. By the way, before I forget, you all have been thanking me for the Academy. You're welcome, friend. Honestly, we created the Academy with a lot of excitement, so you can really improve, truly, in earnest. So you can get better at openings, middle game, end games, calculation, and strategy. Anyone who's in the Academy is guaranteed to improve. I'll leave the link for it down below in the description. When you finish the video, go check it out if you haven't given it a chance yet. Pay attention to the plan for the black pieces. Where's the pawn chain pointing? Toward the king. But be careful, because white is also going to have a very strong attack on the queen side. King's Indian games, okay? You should know that they're going to be decided by an attack. Either black's attack or white's attack, okay? Which of the two attacks is stronger? Black's attack. But if we don't manage to checkmate, then in the long run, thinking about the end game, this space advantage that white has on the queen side is going to end up winning for him. So you have to go for checkmate, and you have to do it quickly, and you'll see that you're going to love it. The game continues as follows. Knight to e1. A very smart technique to defend against this attack that's coming on the king side. You'll see that if your opponent leaves the knight around here, they're going to have a really hard time defending. Don't worry, because very few people know how to pull off these kinds of highly effective defensive maneuvers. So what's our plan now? Move this knight out of the way. Very simple. We want to push this pawn forward here. We want to use our pawns to attack the opponent's king. Do you see how cramped he is? Let's go after him. This is a super important strategic concept you need to remember in the King's Indian. We don't want to trade this bishop. This bishop is incredibly powerful, because this bishop often ends up being sacrificed on h3 to open up the position and deliver checkmate. If we trade this bishop, we're going to be in a tough spot. So if at any point in the game you're offered a trade of light squared bishops, you shouldn't accept it. Right? Super important. The game continues with bishop to e3, a fabulous maneuver by white. You can already see that Kasparov's opponent with the white pieces was an extremely strong player. So what was the plan? Well, to play f3 and get this bishop over here, and for this bishop not only to defend, but also to attack on the queen side. White's counterattack option is to try to break through on the queen side. Is that clear? Do you see how the pawn chain is also telling white where to attack? You'll always find this in your own games. The game indeed continues with f5. That's exactly what we wanted to play. There's absolutely no doubt about it. If you don't understand that you have to play f5 here, then you haven't really understood the plan of the game. f3, the idea. I just mentioned it, right? Not only does it support the center, but it also gives the bishop a square so we can keep defending and attacking. A really good move. Look at what Kasparov does here. He keeps pushing his pawns forward. The idea is clear, right? We want to go for checkmate. We're going to push our pawns to checkmate the white king. On their own, they won't do much, but once we advance a bit more, we'll bring in the knights, the queen, the bishop, and we'll go for the queen. Many times, we would love to trade, for example, this dark squared bishop for this one. We'd really like that, because this bishop can be a bit clumsy and ends up stuck here, trapped behind our own pawn chain. The game continues, of course, with bishop to f2, and now Kasparov doesn't hesitate for even a second. He keeps up his attack. You need to know that you shouldn't waste time over here. Personally, I've won a ton of games because my opponent didn't know how to react quickly on the queen side. They just kept making normal developing moves that weren't helpful, and then my attack came so fast they couldn't do anything about it. That could happen to you, okay? You're gonna have to practice it. If you want more videos about the King's Indian, all you have to do is let me know in the comments, okay? If I see that a lot of people are asking me for more videos about this defense, we'll bring it back and explain more things and look at more examples. So you can use it in your own games, because it's one of my favorites and it's really unique. Alright, so if we attack over here, white has to attack over there. Both of them are doing a fantastic job. So now what? Well, we move the knights over to the Kingside, knight to f6 by Kasparov, and watch out, because here they go for the typical c5 breakthrough. Do you see it? It's the classic breakthrough attack against Kasparov's base. Right here. At some point, you can really put a lot of pressure on this spot with the knights, with this knight and the other one. Also, in certain situations, you can push this pawn forward to really wreak havoc on black's position. So, as you can see, if white plays perfectly, they also have their own counterplay. And so it's simply a race to see who gets there first. But like I said, most opponents, especially if you're playing below 2000 or 2100 ELO, without a doubt, they don't know how to react properly. Perfect. So how does Kasparov continue here after this breakthrough? Do we want to capture here? No, we don't want to capture, because if we do, we're just helping our opponent. These two pawns will become extremely strong, and on top of that, this structure will get weaker and weaker, especially the pawn on e5, which wouldn't have anyone left to defend it. So no, we never want to capture here. In fact, we want them to capture us, because that way they won't have the same pressure anymore. So what do we do here? Nothing, we just stick to our plan. The knight jumps to the other side, not just to join the attack, but also because at some point our opponent might put pressure on this c7 square with their rooks, with their knight, right? And a very typical defensive maneuver that you can use in your own games is this rook to f7. The rook from the second rank defends the whole position properly. So, well, this move also serves to clear the way for the rook. Besides, of course, going on the attack with the knights. Pawn takes pawn. Maybe this move isn't the most accurate in the world because this tension actually favors the white pieces. Since we can't capture, this is very simple. I'll explain what favorable tension means so everyone can understand. You understand what tension is, right? Two pawns are facing each other and both can capture. Who does it favor? Well, it favors white. Why? Because black can never capture, because they would end up in a bad position. So it's white who gets to decide whether to wait, to capture, or to advance. Once they capture, they're defining the tension, and we simply recapture with the pawn. It's crucial to recapture with the pawn to keep our pawn structure strong, and then our problems are over. Rook to c2, they want to get in through c7, Kasparov's maneuver, rook to f7. You get it, right? I just explained this maneuver. And white continues on the queen side. Come on, you have to admit, it all makes perfect sense. Black is attacking on the king side, white on the queen side. Exactly, as I explained to you. Bishop to f8. A very interesting move, with several purposes. First of all, it moves the bishop out of the way so it doesn't block the entry of the pieces. Plus, it's defending the base of the pawn chain, which is the most vulnerable point, with the bishop and with the queen. This point could be attacked quite strongly, so bishop to f8 is a multifunctional move, and a hard one to spot. You don't really need to memorize moves, you just need to remember the ideas. And then it's true that we can study Kasparov's moves to understand these ideas and apply them in our own games. But obviously, there were probably 20 good moves in that position. Alright? You just need to understand the plan Kasparov was using. Here we go. Well, the game continues with a 5, a super logical move. Bishop to e7, developing the bishop, taking advantage of the white squares since the pawns are on dark squares, and now this bishop can move freely along these white squares here. Most importantly, the bishop moves off this open file. At some point, knowing that the light square bishop is so important for us, thank you, they could even sacrifice the rook for the bishop, and wouldn't be a bad idea. So on d7, it's more than well placed. It also allows this rook to join the attack. Many times, we have so much space here on the king side behind our pawns that we can bring both rooks and the queen over to attack on the king side. The game continues with this move here, knight to b5. Would it be a good move to play bishop takes knight? Just a normal piece exchange, right? Okay. That would be a monumental mistake, and I'm sure all of you understand why. We'd be giving up our light squared bishop, which is our lethal weapon. So what should we do? Keep attacking. For example, what moves would be available here? Well, for example, we could play a 5, sure, but an even more direct move would be to play g4 right away, right? Why? Because now we can really break through here. If they take, it would be a bad idea because we're opening up everything. All the lines are opening and we're really going to checkmate the king. So logically, capturing isn't a good option. But be careful because, as we said, white also has their own counterplay on the queen side. They're threatening our rook. What's more important, to move this rook or to go for checkmate? Well, in this case, it's much, much more important to go for checkmate. Sometimes you have to evaluate whether the position is dynamic or static. Do you know what that means? A dynamic position means that the one who acts faster to win will win. Well, that sounded pretty redundant, didn't it? Whoever's faster at delivering mate to their opponent, for example. In this case, the position's super dynamic. If we waste too much time, our opponent will start taking everything, and in the end, we won't be able to checkmate. So we absolutely have to go for mate. You should know one thing, we're always going to have the advantage on this side. Always. No matter what they do, we're going to have the advantage. So, as long as they let us, let's go for it. They're attacking the least important piece in the position. The rook on a8 has the hardest time joining the attack. Look at everything we'd have to move to get it into the attack. And the position calls for us to be dynamic. So here, look at what Kasparov does. Very wisely, I might add. He places the pawn on g3. He's attacking with brilliant precision right now, and it's great. Look at the pawn chain he has right now, set up by the black pieces. Would it be a good idea to capture? No, it would be a very bad idea to open up lines. The most natural reaction, which usually comes up, is the move h3. But playing h3 now wouldn't work either, because we could simply play g takes f2, winning this bishop, and really, even if they capture our rook afterward, it would be 2 pieces for a rook, and our attack would still be going strong. So here, white captures the rook. It's also worth mentioning that they were threatening to bring the knight in here, which is a pretty big deal. Probably at some point we should have given up this light squared bishop, even if it was just for a pawn. Logically, in this case, in this position, they definitely prefer to capture the rook, since that way they'll have a big material advantage. Should we capture this bishop now? Well, maybe that wouldn't be the best idea, and let me explain why. Do we want to have a material advantage? That's not the priority. The priority is to checkmate. And if we go this way and they capture us with a rook and everything ends up well defended, then we should look for slightly better moves. Let's do something much better. Bring the knight into the attack. Not just to bring in the knight, but also to clear the way for the queen. As you can see, we're threatening mate and moi. So you have to be very careful here. It looks like white is already lost here, because if they move the bishop, for example, over here, mate is inevitable. And if they push this pawn, we blow it up with the bishop, and it seems like there's no way to save this anymore. Most of the time, I assure you, if you play this kind of attack well, there's no way for white to save the position. That said, this white player was so good that he found a defense. He moves the king. With what idea? Well, with the idea that now we can't really do much. If we bring the queen over here, he defends everything. And if we capture, the bishop comes back here, and this pawn gets in our way. We can't keep attacking because it's in the way. So we've just won a pawn, but we can't keep attacking. And remember, we're down a rook. So would it be a good idea now to play the queen into the attack? No, that would be a bad idea. However, here Kasparov made a beautiful maneuver. Pawn takes bishop, not to win a bishop, but because now, when the rook recaptures this pawn, white has a wonderful move. The knight jumps to g3, giving check. Can it be captured? No, you can't capture this knight, because then the pawn would follow, then queen to h4, and it would be mate. Inevitable. So this knight can't be captured. The king has to move. How does the game continue? Well, look, now that Kasparov has a bishop in exchange for a rook, he recaptures this knight and now has two pieces for the rook. So white no longer has extra material. They no longer have a material advantage, and our attack is still devastating. The bishop improves his position, and Kasparov realizes there's a very vulnerable dark square diagonal here, so he plays this wonderful move, a6, so now the queen can come out via a7 and start taking advantage of these weak dark squares. Queen to d3, queen to a7, pinning this rook, and look, this final blow's gonna fascinate you. White pushes the pawn, and now Kasparov wins the game with a lethal combination. Pay attention, because you're going to love this. Pawn takes pawn might seem like a totally normal move, right? Bishop takes. But now, after these exchanges, this trade was crucial so that the pawn couldn't trap the queen. Once these exchanges had been made, check out this masterful move. Knight to h1, and white resigned. What a move, right? Impressive. Let me explain why this move is a reason to resign. If they capture the knight, we'll take the rook, threatening all sorts of things here with the knight, the rook, the bishop, and above all, with a material advantage. We'd have an extra piece, completely clean. They wouldn't be able to do anything. They can't capture the knight. If they move aside, we deliver checkmate, although they don't really have to move aside because it wouldn't help at all, right? If something tries to get out of the can, and the rook can't move, because if it does, it would simply be an illegal move. So what happens, for example, if they defend with the queen? Well then, knight takes rook, we trade everything, and we end up with an endgame with a material advantage. Also, looking ahead and connecting it with the endgame and calculation. So you should start studying all parts of the game. Study them well if you want to improve extremely quickly in online chess, and of course, strategy too, since this lesson has been full of strategy. As you know, you have absolutely everything in the Academy. My lessons with titled masters, also with their PGN files, so you can review the class. More than 60 opening courses. You pick whichever one you want to play, for example, the King's Indian, and you study it. You can study all the lines in depth, practice them, watch model games. You have middle game exercises to see who's better, end game exercises. I'm telling you, you have absolutely everything in the Academy, I promise. So my most personal and sincere recommendation is that you try training in the Academy for at least a month, and you'll see that you'll notice a lot of results. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Leave me a big like if you did. And tomorrow, as always, we'll see each other in the next video, my friends. Goodbye.